Alright, EfilDay video 2. Coming down the stretch. I think I'll call this one the maze. I just want to get to the idea, that perspective, as I was talking about before. And so we're just going to kind of move through there some more. That it's all perception. And that we tend, by the mechanism of our body, to project value. We make something valuable. Again, it's not intrinsically valuable. We make it valuable psychologically. Desire. Food isn't intrinsically valuable. You can sit on a plate for 1,000,000 years. If it's some other animal's food, you're not going to eat it. You're not going to say that's food. You're going to say that's something you run away from. And it's just a perception from your psychology that generates the perception that that is something desirable and that you will gain satisfaction by consuming it. From your experience has taught you that, and the lesson is converted into a future ambition and desire to attain that comfort again. And so these are the mechanisms that keep us in the game. So that's the game we're playing. And it's a maze. Let's just call it a maze, just to make it simple. I suppose it makes it simple because a maze has this idea that if you're caught in it, you're caught in the trench of it, and it kind of obliges you to go a certain way and interact in specific ways, and that there are different paths through the maze, and different path will get you to the goal quicker, and some may take longer, but some will have more harshness in them, more adversaries to defeat, more challenges to overcome than other paths to the finish, which isn't much different than any other place in the maze where you can die, except the finish is some sense of I did it my way. Yeah, you get to sit in the center and say I did it my way, and then drop dead or something like that. But I'm just saying that there is no place to get to. You just play the maze, essentially. You just have the illusion of going somewhere, like someplace I'll finally get somewhere, and all my work will be done, and all the things I care about will be cared for, and there will be some sense of security where it wouldn't be a crisis or a problem if you melt away. And there's very few people that will ever have that luxury in their life of dying on a good day, on the right day. So anyway, another lament of the game, and that's not really what I want to get to. I want to get to what happens to you, what happens to your psychology as you start to realize the psychology, when you start to realize that this is a maze. You start looking up and looking around and saying, what am I doing and why am I doing it? So I would analogize that metaphor, whatever, to climbing up out of the maze and observing the gameplay, seeing how it moves and what happens in it, and taking your self-interest out of it for a while. Take your running game, take your biological reflexes, your psychological reflexes, and take them out of playing and put them somewhere else as an observer, and observe. And what happens to your psychology when you do that? What happens to the value of the game? And I guess I would argue that with that knowledge, it becomes harder and harder to see value in the function of the game. You might still see value in getting somewhere in the game, like going back into the game, but that's going to be a different mechanism now that will run you through the game. It'll be your knowledge that, okay, well, I could see from up there that this is just psychology, and so if I confuse my adversaries and I distract those people over there, and I, you know, feed a few crumbs to the ones over there, I can play this game quicker, easier on me. So you can do that. You can go up and look and see the game and realize that there's advantages to be had if you play the psychologies, if you play your own psychology, and you know, control your psychology, control your need for immediate gratification, and put it off a little further. Those kind of tricks can give you advantage in the game. So yeah, you can observe the game and you can see ways that you could replay the game to your advantage, because you're understanding what's controlling these things that you're interacting with, that you're attempting to get your stuff from. You're attempting to negotiate a deal, commerce, of survival, of satisfaction, of comfort. And that's what we sort of have to do. We have to do commerce with the world to get these things. So anyway, the other part of it, though, is you could look at it longer, maybe even better, and see inside of yourself just an insidious mechanism, a mechanism that has then all this projection of value, where it has seen value in where you can see how it is not something real that's motivating you, that it's just trivial, that it's ego, that it's some sense of accomplishment and not a real accomplishment, that your definition of winning is like maybe even a serial killer's definition, right? Just put my name in the newspaper, and put my name immortally on something and attach it to something, so I'm somebody, like it's some desperate attempt to claim a right to fame, to a kind of cheap immortality where your dead record will be somehow currently pondered. Almost, I don't know, kind of like a fetish or something. It's like having a foot fetish and wanting your feet to be in a museum. I don't know, something wacky like that. But that's what's going on in people's psychology, is they're seeing value in the superficial definition of fame or success or accomplishment, and they're not seeing value in what it actually is, which is the product, which is actually producing something in the world, affecting the world in some kind of positive way, and actually changing something or improving it in some way, better than it would have been. Yeah, another good title for a book. Better than it would have been. That ultimately, that's the only value here. You can, if you climb out of the maze, you can see that the only value is that people feel comforted and actualized, and that they shouldn't have to gain that comfort and actualization by doing something insanely risky or stupid or harmful and hurtful. That we shouldn't have to we shouldn't have to be fighting to get to the top of this mountain of success, because there's no value in that. There's no value in wasted competition, and competition that's destructive instead of productive, in the sense that you don't destroy anything, you just make everything stronger, so to speak. There's an ideal mechanism here, and we're so far from doing anything like efficient. So it's like looking. So what I'm saying is, when you climb out of the maze, you can see the filth and the dirt and the crud and the nonsense and the bullshit in the maze. You can see walls that don't need to be there. You can see traps and all this other stuff that could have just clear little signs on them. They could be avoided so easily. People don't have to keep getting ground up in the grinder and all the other stuff that goes on. So it's like looking at some other machine or something, and you can just find, a whole bunch of inefficiencies in it. It's like the engine could get 50 miles to a gallon, and it's only getting 5 miles to a gallon because of these inefficiencies built into it. And so now your mission isn't going to be the same when you're back in the game, because you're going to be realizing that the thing I should be doing is putting signs on the traps, and I should be fixing the maze, because that's where the real value is. in making it possible for things to run the maze without maximizing the harm and minimizing the satisfaction. You should do exactly the opposite. Maximize the gratification and minimize the harm. And when you sit on the maze wall long enough, you're looking at this simple equation of satisfaction and harm, and you realize that there's no reason to pay any price for much of the satisfaction, because the easy thing to do, the easy way to take away the risk of the harm, is just to take away the need for the satisfaction. The gratifications are projections of value. They're perceptions only. They only exist in a mind. They don't exist in reality. And so that's when, like me, life becomes, there's no ability to go back. You can't, once you realize that it's corrupt at its core, there's no way to go back and play the game, to get really caught up in it. I mean, you can't help but get hungry and horny, but what you really can control is what this ego does to you. How much your perceptions of some accomplishment made out of the superiorness or some hierarchy thing or some perception of betterment, like I'm better than them or I've done better or I've accomplished more. All that crap becomes irrelevant, and you can't get caught up in any kind of, not easily anyway. You're still driven by these things. There's no way, you can't live, you can't go back to the maze without being hungry, horny, and have some ego ambition. But the context of it is completely changed, and it just doesn't have the same power of motivating. And so now the motivating is more about this new definition of value, this new perception. The value isn't in the recognition, the value is in the product. And so that comes first. You realize that you have to produce. You can't just get by on your good looks or something. You have to get by on actually doing something with the tools you have. Alright, so this isn't exactly the way I want this to go. It's just more about the fact that you're intrinsically changed by information and knowledge, and that knowledge diminishes the control of your biology, because you see how your biology works, and you see how you're being manipulated. And it's just fundamentally sensible to apply the better standards that your logical, rational brain can come up with than the standards your biology comes up with. Alright, so I'll get to a comment, just because it sort of deals with the dilemma that's at the core of this. If you can trivialize the good in life, ambition, accomplishment, happiness, then I can trivialize the bad, harm, suffering, despair. Now, on the surface, that you say, okay, well, that was interesting. But that's true somehow. That somehow you do have that right, because these are somehow the same thing. And I guess the core argument is that no, they're not the same thing. So you can't just do the same things to them. One of them is vulnerable to psychological interpretation. Desire is very different than pain and suffering. They happen for different reasons, right? I mean, one is a consequence, one is a price paid, and one is the goal, ambition. I mean, the goal is different than the process of getting to the goal. Attempting to score a goal is different than scoring a goal. They're not the same thing. The mechanism that gets you there is different than the there. And so I don't think you can. I mean, you can say it, but I don't think you do have that kind of liberty to trivialize suffering and harm, because they are psychologically experienced. They're not projections of value in something else. They are events of value that happen inside a person. you can argue that you might be able to do that with the actual sensations of gratification that somebody feels when they satisfy an ambition, but that's not what I'm trivializing. I'm not trivializing people feeling good. I'm trivializing what makes them feel good. And there's a huge difference. Feeling good is great. The problem is that you can't feel good first without having a deprivation, a hunger, or a horny, or some other deprivation state that makes you appreciate this thing that you're chasing. And secondly, it's very hard to acquire this satisfaction, this food, without something of value being ground into the food. That there's nothing you can consume that doesn't come from something else's potential welfare. They're put at risk when they're put on your table for your consumption. Consumption is intrinsically risky to the welfare of something else. And so that's the problem. That's the dilemma here. I can trivialize the objective because it's all it creates is the end result. Just as I could trivialize the causes for pain, I could trivialize a ton of the causes for pain. I don't say any of all the causes of pain are legitimate, but the pain itself is. So there's just no denying it. It doesn't matter whether something is in crisis for what you might consider silly reasons or for legitimate reasons. What matters is they're in a crisis, or they're in an emotional problem, or they're having whatever the thing is happening. It really doesn't matter what the cause is. It's the effect that matters, and the effect on the psychology. And so that's what's being balanced against each other. And again, I'm not trivializing satisfaction. I'm not trivializing comfort. I'm trivializing that you would gain it through some risky procedure, that you would play a football game, for example, and risk breaking somebody's neck merely to win a stupid game of irrelevant accomplishment. That kind of price paying is just on its face stupid, and that if you could gain your satisfaction by doing that with a pair of tweezers there, oh, that was a great game. Now, if you could feel the same thing you feel when your team scores the winning goal in the Super Bowl by just going like that, yeah, that would be the win, right? Very low risk. No one gets their neck broken. It just makes sense to make it more efficient. And what you'll see when you model the more efficient world is that you can keep making it more and more efficient. That the need is really the corrupting element here, the projection of value. And so there's just no need to project the value anymore. There's no need to make food satisfying. There's no need to create the hunger. The whole thing exists only because of the biological engine's mandate that there be a performance. And so you're just totally being puppets on strings, and they're puppets that have all this carnage tied to their function. There's just no point in it. So anyway, not the best. I just want to get more to, you can see it in all these other, like if we look at the life of animals in the ocean or something, you can see the game, right? You can see the predators and the prey, and every mechanism is just completely controlled by this, consumption game. There's very little fun and relaxation taking place in that world compared to this one that has a little bit more, because mammals are more complicated, and so we see a little bit more of something that we might think is joyful. But that's just part of the mechanism that creates the thing that propels the thing into the world. The cats enjoy playing with their food, not realizing what they're doing. But that's part of the reinforcing the gameplay. They enjoy it not because it's in itself pleasurable, but because it makes them better at the Carnage game. So anyway, enough. Whatever. Not quite what it needed to be, but yeah, I made it. I thought it would come out better. I mean, I did. I had a thought in my head. I said, "Okay, brain, are you ready?" And it said it was ready, but I can't tell what it's got in its hands. It's got like a raggedy piece of notebook paper, and it's sort of drunk. I can't tell. So it showed up, and it was a little bit of a hillbilly. So it just didn't quite do the work. Yeah, but maybe next time.